So, within the last few weeks, we've seen YouTube censor, deplatform, or demonetize a variety of independent news sources on their channels or on YouTube, and some of I think most of them are on the left side of politics, but that's not the thing. Is some of these sources, or some of these news sources, I'm not familiar with. Some of them I am, some of them I'm not. But the thing is, they're all independent, and they're all outside of what YouTube considers appropriate speech and appropriate news in order to be on YouTube. So I have a short list here. We have Graham Elwood. We've got Jordan Chariton. We've got the Progressive Soapbox, the Convo Couch, Frank Analysis, and Ford Fisher. These are all news sources, independent on YouTube, that have either been demonetized, had videos pulled or censored, or just outright had the channel pulled. That's not to even mention. That's not to even mention the soft censorship, such as not unsubscribing followers, or not showing notifications, or burying them in the algorithm so that they can't be found, so that their videos can't be found, and not recommending their videos. Any number one of those things could, and a combination of those, can certainly make or break a channel, and can surely elevate content that doesn't deserve to be there, or do the opposite. So, most of these I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar with Graham Elwood and Jordan Chariton, primarily because their appearances on Jimmy Dore, the Jimmy Dore Show. Graham Elwood is a regular contributor, and he's been, prior to the pandemic, he was a regular on the Jimmy Dore Show, a guest host often, not unlike Ron Placone, who is another guest on the show. If you're not familiar with Jimmy Dore, he does great work. He's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, journalists out there, which is interesting because he's actually a comedian. As he describes himself, he's a jagoff comedian working in his garage in Pasadena. But anyway, so this is disturbing because the truth is that there's no transparency here. We don't really know. What's disturbing is we don't really know the full scoop. This is all coming from the content providers and them and their experience with YouTube and their channels. And so YouTube, but what seems to unite them on top of different levels of so they're all being censored a little different. Like I said, some are aside from the soft censorship, like I described earlier, the variety of ways to do that. Some of them are having videos pulled, or being completely demonetized, or some of them are having their channels pulled entirely. And so it's just one more example of YouTube trying to box out independent media. They'd much rather get their news from, well, really just fill in the blank with whatever news source you get in autoplay. When you have autoplay turned on, what gets recommended to you besides the channel that you're actually watching and subscribed to? For instance, if I'm watching secular talk, or Jimmy Dore, I usually end up, when I have autoplay on, I'm usually followed by CNN or Fox News or even John Oliver, networks that are considered that are deemed more acceptable to YouTube. So I should also mention Jordan Sheridan on here. I am familiar with. He has a channel called The Status Quo, and he spoke with Jimmy Dore recently as well, because he had his own team. He had one of his journalists on Capitol Hill recording on the day of January 6th when the riot or insurrection, whatever, happened, and his footage had since been pulled, and despite the fact his footage had been pulled from YouTube, despite the fact that he doesn't cover it that he's not spinning it in a certain way. He's simply showing what happened, and meanwhile, mainstream news outlets are using his footage and are plenty monetized and plenty and so mainstream news sources have been using his work. Those are the only two on there that I'm familiar with, but these 5 or 6 channels are all what you call independent news, and I'm sure there's more. There has to be more. These are just the ones that I found out about. So this is a terrifying trend, and of course this all stems back to what we saw. I really do believe that the banning of Alex Jones from a variety of platforms, the coordinated banning of Alex Jones, deplatforming him on just about every network, on every social media platform possible, every means of communication he was banned from. That was really it should have been a big red flag, and that happened 2 years ago already. So, and it's going to continue to happen, and and I guess the only positive side of this, if you can call it positive, is I think it's pretty obvious that this is going to hurt YouTube in the long run, because sooner or later YouTube is going to Sooner or later, YouTube isn't going to be seen as a place where you get news. Sooner or later, YouTube is going to be... You're going to have that... People are going to get their news somewhere else, because sooner or later, there's not going to be room for... There's not going to be room for people like me. There's not going to be room for our news on there before long, it feels like. And once people have... The internet is still a very wide and open place, and people don't want to be forced into watching a certain news source. You can't force someone to watch. You can't force someone to watch CNN as bad as CNN would like you to, and as much as YouTube wants to consider itself the watchman of the news and information, it's simply not going to. It's just an unsustainable business model if they're trying to stay relevant in that regard. Sooner or later, it's just going to become an echo chamber of the voices they like, and people will go elsewhere, and YouTube won't be taken serious in that regard. I don't think it's going to end any better. I don't think it's going to end well for YouTube. And I agree with Glenn Greenwald's assessment that this kind of censorship isn't coming from the higher ups at YouTube and other social media networks so much as it is coming from more established mainstream news outlets who see independent news as a threat and need it suppressed and buried. And ironically, though, because Jordan Sheridan on here, he not only deserves the credit, he deserves credit for his footage on Capitol Hill, but it's the very networks who use his footage who haven't been taken down, who are then pressuring YouTube to take his work down. because he is a dangerous news outlet that can't be trusted, supposedly. So, anyway, guys, thank you for listening.